All right, I'm Dave Hunt, a senior technical marketing engineer here at MobileIron, and I've been focused on Android for work forever. I feel like I have grown up. We actually started this program last year, Android for work, and with that, it's another way to secure data, and so there's a lot of choices out there. How do you secure Android? So what I'm going to cover here are all the options that you have that are available to deploy Android and secure your data, as well as what is the difference between a container, what makes a profile, and those are two different. They really are containers, but Google likes to call them a profile. And it does make sense. And then finally, just talk about the decisions. Just because we have these options, it's pretty difficult to know which one of these. What you need to deploy in your network. I can't tell you what it is, but you have to look at what each one of these containers or profiles can do for you and make the best choice possible. And I'll talk about a little bit more as we go along. So, you've seen this. I like, I'm not the only one that throws up these pie charts or the fragmentation image, but the idea here is I wanted to show that we've got a lot of different devices. And actually, this next slide here illustrates the velocity. What this looks like a mismatch of lines, but what it is it says, look, nothing's really changed. I mean, at about 10 months, we finally get a significant number of users that are checking into Google Play Store on that particular OS. So the velocity hasn't changed. It's remained what I call slow. When Android, when iOS deploys, the next version of iOS, within 24 hours, about 90% of the users out there have already upgraded to that latest OS. Android, in 24 hours, there's a bunch of geeks out there that may have loaded it on to play with it. No one's touched it probably for the first, 4 or 5 months. Then it starts to be rapid adoption. And that's not necessarily Google's direct fault or the users. The users may want it directly, but there's also other requirements. Service providers have, they have to run it through their certification program. Google doesn't have the power that iOS seems to have when it comes to deploying OSs and getting people encouraged to upgrade. But the velocity hasn't changed. They haven't sped it up, they haven't slowed it down, right? Some people, and I just kind of want to illustrate that. So let's go through with the options. So we do have our MobileIron AppConnect, and not too long ago I pulled up one other bullet off of here that used to be called Android for Work app. Have you heard of Android for Work app? Android for Work app was a great program. In my opinion, would have been a nice solution to have because, with everybody being able to wrap their apps, regardless, AppConnect is proprietary. That's ours. If you're going to run an AppConnect app in your network, you have to run MobileIron, which means that you don't have the power of mass on that, right? So it would have been nice to have. But the advantage of AppConnect is that we've had it since 2012. It was the first container that was released out there to make Android ready for the enterprise. Ojis had this great slide that I don't know if he ever talked about it here, but he definitely talked to us employees. There's this line that he drew across and went straight across that said, this is the security you as the mobility administrator expect. And then he had this other line, that kind of jogged along that said, this is the security that the OS gives you. And then AppConnect was kind of thrown in there and said, this is what we did in the early stages to bring that expectation together. We take what the OS can provide, and then we add AppConnect on top of that to give you the security you need to deploy, a BYOD device or a corporate-owned device into your network, right? So it's important. Then, not too quickly, in September 2012, we sent out AppConnect. We deployed, first one out there. But Samsung Knox was obviously thinking about the same thing, and they developed Samsung Knox. That came out in October of that same year. And what it provides is, of course, they've got the advantage of being a device manufacturer. So they could do things that an OS, the OS couldn't do on its own. And also, across vendors, right? And then that was the neat thing about Android for Work. Google said, I recognize what, AppConnect's done, other container solutions have done, and I've also now recognized what Android for Work what Android needs to do in the environment, and they brought Android for Work to the forefront. What this does, of course, is secure containers using native APIs, and it could be an app that specifically will accept Android for Work configuration options, or just any app in the Play Store, and it can then be secured and separated from your personal apps, right? And it comes in two flavors. There's what's called native, and you'll hear these terms, and device owner. And these are Google terms, but native is or work profile, depends on who you listen, who you talk to, but native is that concept that, and the first release was BYOD. The user went out, he paid his own money, he bought himself a device, he wants to use it at work, brings it into work, and now that device is being deployed into the environment, right? And Google's approach with that was simple. They said, you own that device, you only have access, you as the network administrator only have access to the data and the apps you put on there. You don't have access or permission to muck with their Wi-Fi. You can't tell them how they're, if they can sideload or not sideload their apps in their personal side or any of that. But on the work side, you have all control, and if you don't like what they're doing, you can pull all your data and all your apps off that, but you can't wipe that device. With AppConnect, because we have presence on the personal side, where in Android for Work we don't, you can actually wipe the entire device for the user, and that sometimes is an inhibitor for many users out there. So Android for Work may make both you as a network or mobility professional feel comfortable or uncomfortable, depending on your approach, and also the same can hold true on the user side. Many users would be happy to let the administrator wipe their device if they lose it, and know that, oh, if I lose my device, they'll wipe it for me. Other users say, no way, that's my device. Those are my wedding pictures. There's no way I want you to be able to wipe that device. So you can see there's give and takes and everything, and we're going to cover those. All right. So Android for Work, it's Google's approach to the enterprise, like I said. There's the native, then we have corporate owned. So the idea of you got your corporate owned, personally enabled, and then this new concept, called COSU, and we have a couple others coming that Google's a couple other ways to deploy this. COSU is single use or multiple use. I put it in kiosk mode, and it allows us to enable that device. One of the things, though, is to point out this is an alliance of not just Google, but it also requires the OEMs. There's a lot of variables in there. One of them is encryption. I can do the minimum. Google said you have minimum encryptions, but then hand it off to the OEMs or ODMs, the device manufacturers, to the level of what encryption. So when you're thinking about deploying, think about the devices you have. Obviously, Samsung has looked in there. They have put a lot of money down on going heavy with encryption. Google's looked at Knox and said, you know what, we're going to consider that part of Android for Work, and Android for Work is a program. So all that stuff that Samsung brings, plus their heavy encryption. They do 256-bit AES, whereas Google says you only need to do 128-bit encryption on, and a lot of manufacturers say, I want to have an affordable device, therefore you could have a device with not as much horsepower, not as much encryption, and that may be undesirable in your situation. Okay. And again, just to highlight what I'd said already, you only control the data on that device. And in BYOD, in Android for Work native, you can, when you retire or you hit wipe, we have the same buttons for every device, so there still shows a wipe. You click on wipe, all it does is remove the work profile. You hit retire, it removes the work profile, which means it removes the apps and removes the data, and it returns the device in the state that the employee brought it back. And so the best part of this, why would we want to get rid of our AppConnect? And it's not that we want to get rid of it, but we do feel that AppConnect does require wrapping, and it also requires you to train your users. Your users need to know how to use your new, our app catalog. We believe in our app catalog, think it's great, but a user needs to know now know that to get their apps, they have to go to the app catalog to get it. Android for Work, you don't need to do that. It comes in a badge Google Play. You can click on your badge Google Play. You can cycle back. It comes up blank, but you cycle back and say, I want to see my apps. It shows installed apps, and then it goes into and it shows all the apps available. And you can click on any of those apps and download. And the only apps that show there are the ones you enable into your work profile. So it's an important thing. but the app catalog is still available there, right? All right. And then there's this device owner. The picture of that is a Nexus 9. When you have a new device, the device has to be factory, out of the box, reset, right? You can reset a device to factory, that's what you need to do. Then you take your provisioner and you do an NFC bump. And what that does is it tells the device what the Wi-Fi password is, what the Wi-Fi SSID is, and downloads the DPC client you choose. The DPC client in this case would be mobile at work. If you're using MobileIron Cloud, it would be the Mobile Go client. It downloads that, and then the only thing you can do with that, you click on Google Play here, you can't do anything except for well, you can't do anything. Google Play will be completely blank and it says unavailable to you by network administrator. The only thing they can do is launch Mobile at Work or Mobile Go client and then register with MobileIron to continue down that road. And in this, there is no, the idea is that there would be no personal email. It's not that you can't. I mean, obviously you can allow a user to modify their accounts if you do. I don't recommend it, and I'll talk to you about that offline, but you can do no personal email, no personal apps, only what you allow them to have. You control now the radios on there. You now have permission to turn on and off Bluetooth, enable or disable the camera, even enable or disable the phone functionality on that device. All right. Any questions so far? All right. So now into containers. There is a difference between containers and profiles. And the reason I bring up containers, I'm showing that exact same pie chart that I showed earlier. This is just the data I grabbed off of Google that came out at the 10th of this month. Every 10th of every month they say, what is the percentage of devices hitting Google Play? And you can see in the colored section, these are all the devices. So we've got about 65% of the devices are running 5 or lower than 5.0. And many of the devices that are running 5.0 still don't have permission to do Android for work. So you can see I've got almost 75, probably 76% of the devices out there can't even run Android for work. So a container is necessary. So that would be one reason that you need to deploy a container if that's what you permit. Maybe your security policy says if you're going to bring your device, it has to be 5.1 or greater. I mean, that could be what you decide. It may not be what you decide. The other thing is that with the app, we have far more controls. Now, you are limited. Every app must be wrapped. That is a challenge. And every time the OS gets upgraded, a new OS comes, that app has to be rewrapped with MobileIron's new SDK, right? But with that, you can do a passcode on the container. Unlike MobileIron or Android for Work, you cannot have a passcode on the work profile. So somebody unlocks their BYOD device and hands it to their child has access to every app on that device, including the badged apps. You could tell them not to play with them, but that's the only security you have there, right? And then, it does the same thing. It separates work from personal. You've got a work app passcode, and of course, you've got a nice in-house, capability to deliver those. You can deliver that via unknown sources or something else. So, all right. So you've got this, you've got the security layer. The user moves into the environment is kind of what I'm showing here. With that, you've got user authentication. So the user authenticates to be able to use this. He's got his app authorization, his access policy that can be applied, the encryption on the device. Encryption is important. Someone said they did not want encryption on their device. And if you don't run with encryption, you're kind of defeating the security of the device, because just because they don't have the passcode to get in, and usually that's enough to encrypt it, but you don't necessarily need encryption. The memory can be taken out of that and read in clear text because it's unencrypted, right? And then usage analytics. That's something you don't get with Android for Work. So if usage analytics are something you want, that is another advantage to AppConnect. And finally, being able to selectively wipe. That is an option on all of your platforms. So that's the AppConnect profile. Any questions? Lady in the back. No, all right. So, profile. Oh, please. I should just pass the mic around. Oh, yeah. Oh, hold on a second here. I'll just get close. Can I get close?
So it's about analytics. You said AppConnect is able to do analytics on apps.
Identities?
Analytics.
Oh, analytics.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
AppConnect is able to do that. Right?
Exactly. So
what kind of analytics?
So we can, we'd have to talk about it offline. I can't
Okay.
give you all the analytics, but you can get, app usage, a lot of data. I don't know if Gerben has that answer off the top of his head. He may have talked to it, but there is a lot of analytics that you can get out of what the app's using, how much app time the app has been used, even in our app catalog, you can go in and rate the app. So the users have the capability to rate the app and give feedback on the app. So if you've developed an in-house app, you're passing it out to your users, you can go in and rate that app and give feedback back there, and hopefully, in possibility improving that app, right? So there's many analytics, and we can actually go through that and show you what's capable in our demo bar. So that'd probably be the best place to see. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. All right. So the difference between a container and a profile is, like I said, a container has to be wrapped. That means that not any app can run in a container. Every app that runs inside that container must be wrapped. A profile means that any app that's ever been written for Android and exists in Android for Work's point, exists in the Play Store, can run in the Work profile. So those are two very important things. The other thing is, make a note that when you run a profile, the profile separates the data, not the application. So the binary file, such as Chrome, take Chrome OS for example, you run one version of Chrome, and that Chrome has two instances. You have two different icons, one that's badged, one that's unbadged. When you clicked on the badged one, the data, the history, the bookmarks that you have, all those are contained and encrypted on the device separately from the user and personal information. So he could personally go to his own sites. I think the camera app is even more unique. You take a camera app, you launch the Work camera app, even though it's the same application, the same binary that's running on the device, you take a picture with the Work app, it shows up in the Work badged gallery, versus if you take it with the personal app, it shows up in the personal. So you can imagine an insurance adjuster running out with his own device. He takes pictures of his car, and the next night he's off to a wedding party. He takes other pictures with his personal side. Neither one will cross. And so I think that's an important difference, and the data separation is important. And also it's an open platform. I think that the greatest part is that you get much more security in the OS with a profile support, because it looks down, it's secured with SE Linux. The device is encrypted, so the data, if a malware gets on the personal side, it has to cross several layers before it can get into the Work side to protect that. It's not that it's impenetrable, but many layers have been put in place to prevent that. So I already talked about many of these things. I threw this up because you hear this when you're reading about it. You're running out and you want to read more on Android for Work, but there's a lot of terms that Google will use. One of them is Device Policy Client. I kind of used that earlier. That is the EMM client that actually enforces policy on the device. In our case, Mobile at Work or the Mobile Go client. Your Work profile, that's the native version. When you're reading documentation, that's the native version of Android for Work. And Device Owner is that corporate owned, where the whole device has one profile and it's highly regulated and only controlled through an EMM provider. All right. The next section is Knox. I think Knox is also another profile, and they've done this early with early versions of the OS. Obviously there's been vast improvements with 5.1 to make profiles work better. This runs on select version, high-end versions of Samsung devices only. So you're limiting which devices you have. It does cost extra. Samsung charges for this as well, where Android for Work is a free program that Google offers. But it provides this trusted boot. This verifies that when you fire up your device for the first time, you're not firing up, software OS that has been compromised, right? You've got a trust zone, which means that there's an integrity check now across that OS to, again, does another check of not just the boot. Now you're looking at the operating system itself, and finally secure Linux. Secure Linux, just like you see on desktop machines, segmenting the user database and sandboxing, keeping your sandboxed information separate. This is something you also get with Google, but was introduced with Knox. And then that gives you that dual persona. So data is completely separate, encrypted. When it's at rest, it's encrypted on the device. When it's being used is the only time. The keys are held by the application when they're brought up. It's unencrypted. The application uses the data, modifies it, rewrites it, and encrypts it to the hard drive. Other applications, unless they get those keys from the app, in other words, permissions from the app to use that data, even within the same profile, they can't open or read that data. So it's all these layers. Remember, everyone's approaching all these layers to protect the security of the device and your data, right? So this is Google's approach. Google looked at this layer and said, look, first thing I want, we talked about app integrity. So Google in the Google Play Store looks at your apps. If someone wrote an app, and oftentimes when you're developing apps, you take snippets of code from around the web, you put it together, then you use your developer's console, you upload your app to the Play Store, and you start sharing it with everybody. Well, Google looks at this, they run through as best they can, and of course, they have all these algorithms to run, and they make sure that no known malware is in there. Now, unknown and new and inventive, all these people who write malware are very inventive. Something will slip in, and we hear about those, but that's actually quite low. Less than 1% of apps have been discovered with malware that come from the Play Store. Most of your malware apps are when a user goes with unknown sources and downloads it off-site. So this is one layer. So now you don't need unknown sources with Android for Work. AppConnect, because a lot of it's in-house apps, it's many of your apps you write, enabling unknown sources becomes a requirement. Not for Android for Work, which means that not only do we not have to enable it, we can enforce it and say you don't enable it. In MobileIron, we don't even give the user the option. He can, in BYOD, he can go in and enable unknown sources, but it's only if he sideloads an app onto the device, it's sideloaded only onto the personal profile side, not on the work profile, and there's no way to disable unknown sources on the work profile. In other words, no way to sideload an app onto the work profile. And then the user with 5.0 has to now confirm installation. So now the user really, where before apps could go out and install more malware in the background and you wouldn't even know it. Verify apps consent, again, hitting that user, verify the app's warning, keeps telling you, don't do this, right? And then runtime security checks, constantly looking for attacks that are happening on the device, and finally sandboxing the permissions, right? And so this is going to be my last slide, but finally there's a lot of decisions. I kind of threw up a lot of information on you here, but one of the things is there are advantages to AppConnect and to the container. The idea with the container is that you can have a passcode on there. That may be a requirement of yours. And the apps that are available in AppConnect are more than enough for your environment to have. And then, but OS, maybe I want more OS level. Maybe I'm okay with the fact that there's not a passcode on there, and there is a bigger depth of app selections when you look at something like a profile that's enabled, such as Knox, such as Android for Work, right? And then, if you're highly regulated, you're kind of forced into a box. Highly regulated means you need that extra bit of security, and Knox does bring that extra bit of security to the table with far more APIs than even Google provides, plus a level of security that encryption of data that could satisfy HIPAA and other federal and FIPS requirements that you may or may not be confronted with. So, So that is kind of the whole solution and an overview, and I've given you a lot of information. We got started a little late, but if there's any questions.